Good morning, everybody. Today is the first Monday of June. It is June the 5th. And this morning we have quite the spicy episode for you as we have now entered into the territory of Pride Month. When did Pride Month even start, by the way? Is that
June 1st?
this is a recent, yes, but this is a recent phenomena.
Yeah. It's been like, what, 3 years?
I think so, something like that. Because AAPI came in 2 years ago, right?
Mm.
And Pride Month is this month. And I don't know why they picked June, but that seems to be the
According
month.
to Google, it says it began after the Stonewall riots,
That's a long time ago.
1969. I don't think this is true.
Yeah, I don't even remember anybody talking about Pride Month.
The federal government first recognized it in 1999.
Oh, wow, interesting. Okay, well, we wanted to talk about how Christians should be viewing it, spending it, because the world certainly views it and spends it in a very particular way. So sit back, relax. You are listening to the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Samuel Yang.
I'm Eugene Kim.
I might be Adeline.
Dude, for once, can we have a thing where we're 3 for 3? And we have with us Mr. Chunsuk. Speaking of Mr. Chunsuk, I think there has been a constant attack that I've been receiving, just these questions asking why you don't talk more. So, well, why is that? Let me attack you this time.
I'm usually taking notes during the podcast about any things that we have to edit out.
Studious man, note taker man. Gotcha. Well, today we're going to be talking about 3 things in particular. We're going to be talking about Target, Bud Light, and the Los Angeles Dodgers. What do those 3 things have in common? Well, it all has to do with this month that we call Pride Month now, the month of June. Target, since they have been selling, or I guess advertising Pride wear in their storefronts, have lost $10 billion plus. 20% of stock value has gone down. Bud Light, it's been 6 straight weeks since they have partnered and actually announced their partnership with Dylan Mulvaney, who is a transgender man, since I believe it was April 1st. And since then, it's been 6 straight weeks. Sales have been plummeting, down almost 30% compared to last year. And it got to the point where this past, 2 weekends ago, during Memorial Day weekend, they had a promotional rebate that included an amount equivalent to the purchase price of one 15-pack or larger, up to $15, which means that they were giving away their beers for free because they just needed to get it off the shelves, and no one was buying Bud Light. The Los Angeles Dodgers, they invited the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence to their Pride Night in June, where this group will be receiving the Community Hero Award. So for those of us that are not familiar with this news story, who are the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence? They are an anti-Catholic, anti-Christian, LGBTQ plus drag support group that say that they are a leader-edge order of queer and trans nuns. They consider themselves to be nuns. And they claim that, they're this group of nuns, and they make a mockery of the Catholic religion. They've made sexualized shows of Jesus, having him dance on a stripper pole and stuff like that. And they make a mockery of Christianity as a whole. And so what happened with this group was the Dodgers had invited them over to their stadium to receive the Community Hero Award. And then Christian groups, there was some pressure from the Christian groups to rescind their offer, so they did. And then after they did that, the left pressured them, and so they rescinded their rescind. So they scinded. And so now the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence are coming to the Los Angeles Dodgers Stadium, and they will be receiving an award. Now, this is a group that is explicitly anti-Christian, explicitly makes fun, a mockery of Christ in disgusting ways. And multiple baseball players have come out in the Dodgers organization and outside that have said this is wrong. This is not it. I don't think a single player actually has come out in support of this action. But yeah, so that's what's happening in the world today. And all of this has to do with Pride Month. All of this really, that's what it boils down to, right? This sin of sexual immorality in this month that celebrates it. So as Christians, Pastor Eugene, how do we view this month? Do we do anything different? I mean, it seems like all these different stores, everything is in support of this. How does this affect the way that we shop, the way that we go to different stores? How does this impact us as Christians today?
I think understanding what is going on in the world today can be a daunting task. It can get you tired. It can get you maybe even feel defeated because are you going to boycott everything?
Right.
And so Pride Month is, the secular holy, even though those things are oxymorons, but it's the holy month of pride in the secular world because that's their religion. And the thing about it is when we look at it from the Christian perspective, it is everything that the Bible says is wrong. Everything the Bible says will lead to damnation, hell, the fiery pits of hell, all the things that we've read in the New Testament and the Old. And what I think Christians first need to understand is why are they pitting themselves up against God and His Word? Not are they? Because I think if you're still questioning, are they pitting themselves up against God and His Word? And I think you really don't understand what's going on when you're just saying things like, love is love, and why can't just people love who they want to love or have sexual relations with whomever they want or whatever they want as long as it's consensual, things like that, which hopefully I took to task in answering in yesterday's sermon. But let's focus on one. Target is the one that put their pride display before June because, if you get ahead of it, then their DEI score will go up.
What's DEI?
Diversity, equity, inclusion.
Okay.
There are indices that companies are rated with or ranked with that investors can also know. So you don't want a low DEI score.
Right.
And so you don't want that low score. So, there are people that are trying to get ahead of it, like places like Bud Light or Ford or the LA Dodgers. In this point, the one example I want to use is from Target. And so Target put their pride display front and center. As soon as you walk in, it's in every Target store, it's there. It's just hitting you in the face. And then these moms are coming up with these videos and putting it on Instagram and, TikTok and other social media. Like, look at what they're selling. Look at what they're displaying. Look at what they're really glamorizing as these bathing suits with tuck options. It's these chest binding apparel and things like that without even getting into how dangerous it is, not just mentally, but also physically for children to do these things. It's a dangerous thing to take your organs instead of letting them naturally develop to tuck or bind or restrict its growth. How come no one's talking about that? But anyway, that's what they're doing. But there's more to the story. People have found out that there's a designer for all this LGBTQIA plus, 2S, whatever it is, apparel and gear for that pride section in Target. And it is from a guy who is a self professing Satanist. And this is what he says: Satan loves you and respects who you are. I'm quoting from him now. LGBTQIA plus people are so often referred to as being a product of Satan or going against God's will. So fine, we'll hang with Satan instead. So that's a direct quote from this designer.
The Target designer guy.
The Target designer.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a bunch of apparel that's designed obviously for kids and things that says things like too queer for here or we belong everywhere and things like that. It's obviously an affront against God. There's a point to it. It's not just because they want to live the life that they want to live. Now we have to indoctrinate our kids with things that are amoral, that are evil, that are terrible things, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually for kids to do. He says things like Satan is hope, passion, equality, and love. So naturally, Satan, I'm quoting from him again. So naturally, Satan respects pronouns. He loves all LGBTQIA plus people. And so that's why he has designs that says Satan respects pronouns, and there's an icon on top of that line that's Baphomet, which is the horned devil.
Yeah.
And so he has that. He has things like signs, little pins that you could wear that says heteronormativity is a plague. So being heterosexual or enjoying that you are heterosexual is a plague. It's a terrible thing. So these are things that Target is not only promoting, they are sponsoring, and they are pushing to the front line for everyone to see. Guess what? People don't care. That's what they're banking on. They're banking on people not caring and still shopping at Target, because what other options do you have? You know, you middle class woman in the United States, where else are you going to go? Are you going to go to Walmart? You know, are you going to go to some other place? You're still going to come back to Target, aren't you? And that's why they're continuing to, you know, push these evil, demonic, like literally Baphomet, literally a demon figure is being sold for kids. And let alone the mottos and, you know, like skeletons having rainbows. There are some T-shirts with naked people in sexual poses that are just shaded out. And that's what they're having kids wear. And not just the tuck and binding options. This is pure evil. And the CEO was caught with an internal memo that went out that said, oh, you know what? I know that all this stuff is happening. And so this is an internal memo from the Target CEO that someone posted. This is a quote from him. We can still show up and celebrate Pride in meaningful ways. To the LGBTQIA plus community, we stand with you now and will continue to do so, not just during Pride Month, but each and every day. And so people thought there was some backlash to boycotting Target, but the Target CEO still puts this out there. And so some people are very confused. How can they still promote this garbage when even they're seeing a hit of $10 billion?
Yep.
There needs to be some backing, some kind of force that is greater than $10 billion. And now we know that places like BlackRock, Vanguard, State, what's the other one? State, it's for, I'm having a blip here, but there are these three major like State Street equity firms. These are the places that even you and I and people in our church, where we buy, you know, mutual funds from, where we buy like ETFs from and things of that nature. We buy funds from them and we give them our money so that they'll invest in the market. Like almost all of our pensions, the people in the United States, one of these three holds them. And so our pension funds are tied to them. So we give them all our money so that they can invest for us. So they are our broker. And what they're doing with the clout and the power that they have of holding all this, they are the ones pushing. It's no longer a conspiracy. It's out there. And it's just common knowledge that if you don't know it, that means you have been reading anything, I suppose. And I guess we can go on to give more and more, you know, evidence, substance around this. But I think people can do their own research and figure this out.
Yeah.
And so if your main purpose now isn't to make money, it isn't to serve the investors to your company, because that's what it should have been. But it's now you're beholden to these firms who hold money for the investors. So now we have these middle managers, so to speak, that are holding our money. And even if we don't agree with what Target is doing, it's not like we have Target stock that we pull out. We gave it to BlackRock already to invest in Target for us. So they're the ones holding the majority of, the stocks and equity in Target. And their board is the ones saying you need to have a certain rating on this DEI scale. Otherwise, we will downgrade you from our firms. And so that's why some people are confused. Like, oh, how come we're boycotting Target and they're losing tens of billions of dollars and in a matter of weeks, and it doesn't seem like they're going to shift. In fact, they're lying, literally lying to the public. Oh, we're sorry, we did this. We're going to take it out. But they don't take their Pride exhibits away from their stores. They just maybe move it to another location, only in certain areas.
Yeah.
And we live in an area that is very pro LGBT. We live in Jersey. It's very blue, unfortunately, meaning very left. And so they don't even have to move it, and people don't care. And why is it, and people are wondering, why is it this targeting of kids or family events that people have to always do? It's never like in these adult only entertainment areas. So if you want, so there are some people of libertarian affect, right? And they're like, if you're an adult, you should be free to do what you want as long as it doesn't impinge on my rights. And they have those kind of leanings. But it's not even that anymore. It's in our schools. It's in Target, where you bring your kids and your family to go shop. They have children's items, and things of that nature. Bud Light sponsored Dylan Mulvaney, who cosplays. He's playing a 6-year-old or a preteen girl.
Yep.
He's not playing a 38-year-old man or whatever age he is.
Nope.
Playing a woman. That's his age. He's playing a teenage girl. He talks like a teenage girl.
Yeah.
Who is he trying to convince? He's not trying to convince old men to dress up as women. He's trying to convince our young ladies or young men that this is okay. So that's his target audience. And when people say, "Oh, now Bud Light is using Dylan Mulvaney to target their audience," who are they trying to go for into drinking Bud Light? It's not 40, 50-year-old men. It's these youngsters. So this is all on purpose. So as Christians, when we see this, how ought we to respond, right? I think that's the more important question. Hopefully our podcast will give a good amount of information like what you gave and what I gave. But there's more to it. And you have to do your research. You have to read across the board. We have recommended places like Real Clear Politics to get, the left and right side. If you want something that is of right of center, we've recommended like listening to the Morning Wire, where there's not too much commentary. They'll just tell you the news, which I really do appreciate. And so they've been rising up in the rank of podcasts, almost catching up to us, the DCP.
Almost, not quite.
Yeah, but they might get there one day at this rate. But all joking aside, it's one of those things where you're like, well, now that I know this, now what? And so I think that's the more important question we have to task. Now what? I think there's power in numbers, and I think there's power in some kind of collective understanding and movement. And this is what I believe that big corporations are counting on us not doing. They don't think that people have the will or enough determination to not shop in Target or not buy a Bud Light or not go to an LA Dodgers game, even though they literally they don't just, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence aren't just making fun of Catholics. It's rank blasphemy against God. Yeah. And they do these sexual acts that I don't think, so our podcast goes even beyond what I say in sermons. I don't even think we could say what they do in our podcast. No. So, because it's so disgusting, it's so rank, and it's so disturbing that just to say what they do would blow your mind. It's so terrible. And this is who the LA Dodgers invited to their games where people bring their kids.
Mm-hmm.
You bring your 5-year-old to witness their first baseball game because it's an American pastime. It's a tradition.
Yeah.
And this is who they invited. This is not by accident. And so what we have to understand is that the devil is trying to get as many people as he can until he goes down to the pit forever. The lake of fire for 1,000 years in Revelation. And until he is there, he's going to take as many people as he can. It's very reminiscent of what we saw in World War II. Even though Hitler knew he lost, he tried to take out as many people as possible, even to the very bitter end.
Yeah.
Until he shot himself at the bunker. And so this is what we are seeing is happening. They're trying to take out as many people as possible. So for Christians is to stay vigilant, to understand the truth. When I say collective understanding means you need to come together and review the doctrines that God has given us. You need to stay strong and firm in what is true and what is false. There's no wavering here. People are saying, well, we should still use people's pronouns because isn't that courtesy? Like if someone wanted to be called Loretta, wouldn't you just respect their ask and call them Loretta?
But what was their real name?
Sam.
Oh. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so isn't that so? These are things that we're constantly inundated with. How does the Christian respond? Well, the Christian doesn't respond in a hateful attitude toward the person. But we also have to understand that we hate the sin. So when someone is indulging in sin, we don't cave to them. We don't placate to them in that sin. That's something that I think so many Christians have lost because instead of truth, we believe that niceness is our God. It's the ideal. Niceness is the ideal. Niceness is not the ideal. It's not one of the fruit of the Spirit. It's not. There's gentleness, but there's also self-control. There are things that we want to tell for the sake of the other person. This is reality. You are not a Loretta. I mean, you could change it on your driver's license maybe, and that's your legal name, but you're not a girl, Sam. You are a man. And I even hate...
Why did you that? Why did you?
Just give you an example. So, just, hypothetically
talking to someone named Sam.
No, but you said you.
Hypothetical
you. were looking at me.
No, hypothetical you. But we don't indulge in someone's lunacy or someone's, when they lose grip on reality. We don't indulge in that. Bringing them back to the truth is the most loving act that you can do. And so we don't hate them for doing that. We actually want to bring them back in the fold. Same thing with any kind of sinner. You call out the sin. If someone's a murderer, you call out the sin for what it is. You don't downplay the murder for a murderer. You say murder is a horrible sin. It's taking away another life. You're taking away a life that God has imbued his image in. That is a terrible sin. And you have to find forgiveness only in Jesus Christ. That's the truth. That would be the most loving thing to say to a murderer. Why has that changed for someone who is sexually immoral? Why has that changed? And so this kind of deviancy, this deception has crept in even in our churches. That's what I'm more concerned about. More than Target doing it, I'm more concerned about people who are churched who think that there's nothing wrong with what Target is doing. That's what I'm more concerned about. I'm more concerned about people who go to church that think like, you know what? Forget this. I still want to support Bud Light for whatever reason. There's absolutely no reason to drink Bud Light.
BLLs and BLPs, if you know what I'm talking about.
No.
Yeah, no. Okay.
But those are things that I think we need to come to a common understanding that this is something that the church can never adopt. Now, if we want to boycott and all those things, I believe they are secondary, and I think they're powerful tools. Just because it's secondary, like we said, doesn't mean it's unimportant. But they are powerful tools. But what is primary is we have this common understanding that whatever the Bible says is wrong, false, evil, will lead to the pits of hell. Literally, that's what it means. It leads to the pits of hell. And we must reject that. And so now that we know that, There are people who are deflated, who feel defeated. How can we ever win against Target? And I want to speak to that. There are some people who are hopeful, optimistic, pessimistic, whatever the case is. I think our job is not to wrestle with flesh and blood. It's warring against the powers of evil. It's a spiritual battle. So when we proclaim the truth and we proclaim it on the street, that's actually the battle. When we talk to our friends about the evils of the LGBTQ ideology, that's the battle. And that's what church people aren't doing. Maybe they'll silently boycott Target. Maybe they'll silently not buy Bud Light. Well, I believe that's secondary. I believe what is primary is you proclaim the truth, you live out the truth. And so hopefully that you'll see it from me and all of our church elders and even the lay people in our church. And I would pray that if you don't attend our church, for your church as well, that this is something that you must speak out against because of its pervasiveness, because it is indoctrinating our children directly. It's in our schools, it's in the storefronts, it's in our websites, it's in the forums that they join, it's in TikTok, it's in Instagram, it's in everything that they're looking at. And you have to speak out against it, because if not, you are complicit. You are the ones that are letting them continually view this without any pushback whatsoever. And that's something that I don't think I could ever stand, and something I'll speak out against. So more than what the world is doing, I think we need to talk about what the church is doing. And these churches that are promoting LGBTQ, they are apostate churches. Churches that don't speak out against it, they are churches that you need to be wary of. Why aren't they speaking out against it? Is because they don't want to cause quote unquote division. And so they won't preach on the whole counsel of God. Then they're not a church either. Be careful of why you're not preaching against what is one of the most pervasive sins in the world today.
Yeah.
And so if you don't understand that, I hope, we have shed some light onto why this is such a big deal for us, our children, but our church as well.
So I want to ask a couple questions, I think, based on everything that you just said. That was a very nice chunk of answers. But just kind of going back to some of the things you said earlier on, why do you think, and we've talked about this regarding Balenciaga, we've talked about Lil Nas X, we've talked about other public figures and even organizations that are just publicly, blatantly satanic. And it seems that for generations, satanic themes were always looked down upon. It was kind of like a hush-hush hidden thing. And so, Satan was more cleverly staying hidden in his schemes, but now it's just openly public, proudly public. So why do you think this is happening? Is this truly nearing the end times, the last day? Is that why? Or are we just that stupid now where Satan can just publicly announce himself, and through these different organizations and people and public figures, and we're just sitting by and just saying, yeah, that's okay?
Well, I'm not a pre-mill dispy like you.
No, I'm not.
But I believe that the Bible has told us that there will be times like this.
Mm-hmm.
This should come as no surprise to those that continue to read and study God's word. And so let's read a passage in the word where it explicitly tells us things like this will happen. And that's in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 5.
2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 to 5 reads, "But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. Avoid such people."
And so there are things where it gives us a warning, like we could stay on avoiding such people. No one wants to avoid such people. They're our friends, they're our coworkers. No one wants to do that anymore, We're always thinking, well, we should be an evangelist. I don't know. It's so cliche these days. But whatever the case is, I think we have foregone biblical counsel and instruction in many ways. And so the word difficulty, the King James Version translates that as perilous. We are in perilous, difficult, or dangerous times. And there will be times like this in the last days because we're in the last days, yes? And so we see all these things happen. It just continues to get worse and worse until God shows preliminary, like judgment. Every once in a while, he does show, like, you know what? I'm going to put things back into order, which means judgment for the evildoer. And so that's why we know, you and I say we're millennials, but
Yes.
there will be times like that, and this is definitely approaching, really bad times. But I like how this starts by saying people will be lovers of self. That's exactly how he started with this mess, with the self-help, self-love, self-glorification, self-everything. It's just about the me. Make sure you have you time. And make sure you are fed. Marriage isn't about the partner anymore. People get married so that they feel fulfilled. And when they don't feel fulfilled, they get a divorce. That's not why you get married. In a covenant marriage, you get married for the good of your partner and for the good of society. And when you see that happening, you see that there is a gratification that comes because you have fulfilled the role that you've been given. No longer do we think in those terms. We think those kind of things are just repressive, they're oppressive, right? And now that's why everything that we read here in 2 Timothy chapter 3 is alongside the satanic model.
Yeah.
Satanic model, put simply, which has been passed down through maybe 200 years or so, is do what you want.
Yep.
Do what you want is the satanic model. That's why when we had that little episode, we saw the Easter egg in Google Translate where you translated Balenciaga and it translated it as do what you want.
Yeah.
Because that's the satanic model. Why would they translate Balenciaga do what you want? Is it just random? Obviously not. It's a quote from somewhere. Where is it a quote from? It's from a Satanist who made it famous, put it on their flags, and said, do what you want. I believe now the satanic quote is love is love.
What?
I think that's a satanic quote. Love is love because that's the LGBTQ
It
quote.
is. Yeah.
And so love is love. Love isn't love. Are you kidding me? Love is what people like Woody Allen says when he had sex with his stepdaughter or his adopted daughter, which is insane. And then so people say things like, the heart wants what it wants. That's what he's quoted saying when he did that.
Can you just explain what love is love means? Because love is love, right? Like love is love. But can you just explain
it's a nonsensical statement, but it's promoting this idea that if I love someone, it's love. You can't judge that love.
I see. Okay.
That's what it means.
So even inappropriate love is just under this general broad love, which is good.
Love is love will extend everywhere.
Gotcha.
Because if you continue to take this to its extreme ends, then what if you love a 5-year-old? Love is love.
I see.
It's the most stupidest, moronic, but also if people are doing this on purpose, it's the most evil intended thing that we are putting on our flags in our schoolrooms, classrooms.
Right.
These elementary school teachers, these school administrators that they're promoting and they're instructing our teachers with. It's always attacking the kids too, because it's trying to dismantle the family, the unit that God has set up so that this world will flourish. It's one of the most wonderful acts of common grace we've received is the unit of the family. And Satan is attacking even that institution.
Yeah.
And people are falling hook, line, and sinker for this garbage. And so I get that the world will do it. But why are Christians falling for this? Why are people talking about this and defending this? And why aren't they talking against it? This is why when we talked about Big Eva when they weren't talking against what is going on, that was a big concern for me because Big Eva are the people that we follow.
Yeah.
These are the teachers that you buy books, listen to their podcasts and things like that. Why aren't they talking about it? It's because they want to reach a broad audience. They want to talk about Jesus first and things like that. But if you look at the epistles, and we, you and I and Junsuki, we read the letter from Jude, right?
Yep.
And even that letter says, I wanted to talk to you first. I wanted to write to you about the common salvation or the commonality we had in salvation, the blessings of salvation. But I need to talk to you about this first. And he goes on to talk about, guess what? Sodom and Gomorrah, about sexual immorality. Yep. He's saying this is a terrible, terrible thing you need to correct. And so he starts from there. So yeah, you want to talk about Jesus and his saving grace. Amazing. So did Jude. You know better than him? Is that what you're saying? You know better than the apostles? You know better than Jesus Christ, who called out sin for what it is? As he forgave people, he said, go and sin no more. How come you're not talking about this? That's a big, big red flag for me. And it's very concerning when people now have adopted this idea that we need to be nice first and we need to talk to them about how nice Jesus is without addressing the sin. Peter, all the apostles, Jesus Christ always addressed the sin. Always. Even when Jesus healed someone, he would say, your sins are forgiven. Meaning even the physical healing, he was addressing the sin. And this is something that our preachers are now losing. And it's so sad to witness that these monster churches, these maybe I meant to say monster.
Mega churches.
But they are now monsters. They are not promoting what is good, what is right. And it's very, very unfortunate that people who we think are part of the invisible church are actually going against what the Bible is talking about. And now we have people with mega churches who are saying we need to unhitch ourselves from the Bible itself. It's not about the Bible talking about Jesus Christ's resurrection. It's about Jesus Christ's resurrection just being a physical reality or something to that effect. It has nothing to do with scripture. So they want to continue to move away from scriptural authority and to whatever authority they want to project.
So speaking of how Christians are to be, you did mention about not placating to the sin. And, you've mentioned this before too, and this culture of niceness that we have and how loving our brothers and sisters is calling out their sin. But I'm just kind of wondering, for those of us that have heard this before and have kind of thought through how we can practically do that, how can we not placate to them in that sin, but still hate the sin? So in the passage that we read together this morning for our staff meeting, even in Jude, we say that, Jude says we are to even hate the clothing that's on the flesh, that's fleshly, right? So we're to hate this sin so much. So my question is, how can we practically do that? Where we hate this sin so much, but at the same time, love the person and be gentle and act gently, because it seems like there's different emotions going into this one interaction that we have. So how do we do this where we love the sinner so much, at the same time, we just despise the sin?
Yeah. And so I think we need to have the foundation we had for the first 30 minutes of this podcast or whatever.
Yeah.
If you don't have this foundation, then this next step won't make any sense at all. Maybe it'll even be offensive. But if you have this foundation, then let's say your baby, Adeline, has a blowout diaper. Poop all over the place.
Ooh, she did though before,
okay. And so it's disgusting.
Yeah.
It's rank. It's going it's going to stain. It's going to, rot anything that is organic, right? you got to get that stuff off, right?
It's rank. Yeah.
So what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to love the poop? Are you supposed to put it in your nose and be like, oh, I love it? That is sick, right?
Yeah.
That would be a disturbing person that would do this. If you know what sin is worse than poop is my point.
Yeah.
But we don't even treat poop like that. Why are we doing now? Maybe we will. I think we're going to sick territory. I saw this one thread that someone posted on a recent Lady Gaga concert where she had someone vomit on her in one of the shows. It was like it was just a thing that they wanted to do. So people are just, they are literally like, they are engaged in play.
Mm.
They are engaged in orgiastic plays.
Mm.
And this is the disgustingness that God is calling out. You don't you don't love the poop. That's not what you're called to do. You're there to clean the poop because you love the baby. You
Right.
don't want the poop to continually be all over the baby. It's gonna there's gonna be diseases. There's going to be eventual death that comes from it. You want to clean the poop, perhaps. And so why would you want to go near poop? The natural reaction for someone is not to go near poop, but if you have to, it would be with the purpose of cleaning it. It would be with the purpose of showing the other person if they're able to clean it up themselves, like clean the poop, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is just, it's not a one-to-one metaphor.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, even with the idea of poop, you wouldn't go near it. But here we are, we're relishing sin. We love it now. We're supposed to be tolerant. We're supposed to placate to it, but we're supposed to celebrate it now. We're supposed to be okay with these pride like parades where we take our kids and we have like butt naked men like twerking in front of our kids. I think CPS needs to come there. They need to take the kids away from these disturbed parents who are obviously sick in the head. There's no parent in their right mind who would want this kind of sexual exposure to their kids before they're developed or ready for it. And yet parents are doing it. Why? It's because they're sick in the head. Normal parents, if you are a normal parent who's healthy, emotionally, you don't do that stuff. But here we are, we're supposed to be sympathetic. Well, it's their kid. Obviously the parent can do it. No. In the same way, if a parent is letting a child play out in oncoming traffic, you go, there's something wrong with this parent.
Yeah.
Parent's not right in the head. Same way, if you're a parent bringing your kid to these pride festivals and parades where people are twerking half naked, there's something wrong with you. We're afraid to say it because we don't know how to even engage remotely in apologetics. Because why? Because we have already succumbed to being dumbed down with this niceness. You know, being nice is being dumb now. And that's what niceness is. And, you know, things like ignorance is bliss. What you guys do in your corner, I don't really want to care about. And we take it to the extreme. Like, I'm not going to go knocking on everybody's door. But at the same time, if that neighbor brings what they're doing in their household into the front yard, that's public.
Yeah.
It's in public view. Even if it's their property, it's public view. And you have a right to say something about that, especially if it's disturbing the peace or it's, you know, trying to do something terrible to your kid, whatever it is. And so I don't like what's going on in the world. And because we are becoming more and more of an amoral society, this degradation that we see here should be no surprise. But again, I want to go back to step 2. We take the sin for what it is. It is a disgusting, terrible, evil thing that is deplorable, detestable in the sight of God. And so we should also see it with that kind of abhorrence. Now, as far as the person is concerned, if they're mucking around in this, you know, in fecal matter, we could be like, this fecal matter is disgusting. You should get out. But we don't go in the fecal matter with them and muck around with them.
Yeah.
That is terrible. And so if you're saying, how do we technically love the sinner and hate the sin? Like, no. I don't like that phrase anymore.
Yeah.
What I want to do is whoever's mucking around the sin, you call out the sin for what it is. In your love for the sinner, you're calling them to repentance. That's love. Not you mucking around in them. Or imagine how odd or weird it would be if someone was mucking around in this like poop and you're like clapping. Oh, I'm not going to go in the poop. I want to applaud what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's stupid too. So none of this makes sense. It's because we've become a society that is so biblically illiterate, that is so engaged in this culture of niceness at the expense of truth, that we've come to a place where Christians are so weak and feeble. Who knows? We might not even be able to digest milk. And that is a very sad place to be in as a church.
You know, you talked about the phrase hate the sin, love the sinner. And you've talked about this before in a sermon too, why you don't like this phrase and why you don't think it's good. But you know, it's interesting. I think these days people have it confused. When they see someone that's a sinner, they actually hate the person and they don't consider the sin to be that bad. How do we fix this kind of heart where when we see somebody that's sinning, we immediately have this condescending view? We immediately think we're holier.
Both sides can be guilty. And this is what we have explained in our podcast. I'm sure many of you already know. It's called ad hominem attacks, right? It's when you attack the person instead of the argument.
Yeah.
You don't attack the person. You attack the idea. You attack what they're representing. You're saying this is bad. But it's because we have come to a place where we have been married to our ideals that we can't separate ourselves from it. And any kind of group, whether it's even a religious group, even someone that is Christian can fall or succumb to this kind of tactic. It's not a good way to argue. You win nobody with ad hominems, but you will rile up the mob, right? And so what we don't want to do is we don't want to resort to ad hominem. We don't want to attack the person. We want to say this is bad. And if someone thinks that they're being attacked by it, maybe you can explain to them, I'm not attacking you. I'm attacking what you are promulgating. Your rebellion against God is going to lead you down eventually further into the pit of hell, despair, despondency, all these terrible things. And so we want you to turn back from it. And the only way that's possible is through the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's through understanding that Christ came to die for sinners, of which I am the worst, is what Paul would say.
Yeah.
And so that's the understanding of saying, here's the good news. But it's never to downplay the bad news, but it's always to say the bad news is really bad, but that's why the good news is so good. And so when you hate the person, it is exactly what I guess Matthew 7 intended. It's to put judgment on the person. It's like, I wish you would go to hell. That's not what the saint does. That's not what the Christian does. We don't wish the person to go to hell. We tell them that they are on their way to hell unless they repent. That's the loving thing to do. And if people feel attacked, the objectivity doesn't come from the person. It comes from what God has commanded you to do. And so, what has God commanded you to do? It's to say what is, in truth and love, the gospel is, right?
So it seems like what you were just explaining is actually, and you said this before too, is the difficulty, I guess, in speaking with and seeking to minister to someone that subscribes to the LGBTQ plus agenda. It's, I hate this sin, but they would say, well, no, you hate me because this sin is me. This is how I identify myself. And so, I mean, I think that's a difficult conversation to have, because how do you even then move on from that? Because now you're speaking over each other because you're saying, no, this is not you. But then the person would say, no, this is me. This sin is me. And the world has made this individual identify wholly with this sin. And so how do you even begin a conversation there?
Yeah. There was this one scene in Talladega Nights by Will Ferrell.
Shake and bake.
And it's playing off of another joke that was there. But there's this joke. It's like a story joke. The jokes that I like. And there's this guy who believed he was dead. No one can convince him otherwise. And so his wife is like, "You're not dead. You're alive." He's like, "No, I'm dead." So they took him to the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist is like, "Why do you think you're dead?" "Because I know I'm dead." And then he goes, "Well, can dead people feel pain?" It's like, "No, because they're dead. I want you to take this pencil and stick it in your thigh because dead people won't feel pain." And so the guy, he takes a pencil and he sticks it in his thigh and he screams out in pain. He's like, "Yow!" And then the psychiatrist now thought he got him. He's like, "Wow. So what did you learn?" He's like, "I'm shocked, doc. I thought dead people couldn't feel pain, but now I know they do." So one of those things where people are in deep delusion, what the joke is pointing to the fact that even if you're in deep delusion, even evidence to the contrary might not shake you. because it is up to the person to be, it is your responsibility
Yeah.
to get out of that delusion.
Yeah.
I can't shake you out of it yourself.
Right.
And the person needs to also recognize that he can't fully come out of that delusion at all without the help of God. It's God who is the source of all truth. So if you have any semblance of truth, it is from God. He's the ultimate source. So if you know He's the ultimate source, I would say go to God so that you can be separated from what you believe is your identity to the truth. How can you separate yourself from what you believe you ought to be? Because there really is something called gender dysphoria, where you believe that you are the opposite sex stuck in a body and you hate the body. Gender dysphoria, by the way, is very Gnostic in its like base understanding of things. Like your mind and your body can be disconnected. This is not the Christian understanding. Your mind and body and soul are one.
So Gnosticism is that belief.
It's the
Right.
separation.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. And so, there are people who do have gender dysphoria. They need to be treated.
Yeah.
In the same way, people who are deluded need to find treatment. And so it might take a while, it might not take. So if they feel like I'm being personally attacked, you can reassure them, my intent is not to personally attack you. It is to tell you what the truth is. And now the difficult part, I believe that this is why people think this is a difficult to impossible task, is because now all these big tech companies and now big retailers and all these big corporations are siding with the gender dysphoric nonsense. And so if you misgender, quote unquote, misgender someone, it's an offense.
Yep.
If you, talk anything bad about the trans community, it is transphobia. And so if they use all this like very, very Orwellian language, there's so many steps we need to go back with. That's why I'm saying, if you have succumbed to this, man, sometimes you can't even take milk, because I got to keep on taking these steps back and back and back, because we keep on going further back in the scale of moral understanding. And so now we have to go back to what is the difference between a man and a woman? Why is it good that the design God gave us we should adhere to, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We got to go all the way back there. 50 years ago, we never needed this subject. And so we got to go back to there. Then we got to go back to roles. Forget roles. Roles aren't even something that we can even talk about now, even though ironically, transgender people take on roles. That's so funny, right? Like if you're a transgender man, no one goes out with slacks and a suit and says, "Oh, by the way, I'm a woman now." They start wearing dresses. And so that's kind of funny. They take on the roles, but then roles are something that our egalitarian society has, forsaken a long time ago. And the trans movement is bringing those back, which is ironic. It's just the chaotic nature of, evil that we see. I think what is clear is whatever was a cultural norm, you must stand against it. So,
yeah.
I'm looking for children's shows for my baby, right? And people recommend a lot. There's like, I don't know.
Should we make a children's show?
Like owl something with owls. It has something with God in it. There's something like with numbers. I think it's called Number Blocks, whatever. And someone recommended this YouTube show with millions of subscribers. I think in the tens of millions, called Miss Rachel. And I was like, oh, so my wife turned it on because she got a recommendation for it. And man, my kid was glued to the TV because there's this huge person singing to them and talking to them about like, this is an apple or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right? And in my head, I'm just thinking, I remember hearing something about this in the news. I just can't remember. So I Googled Miss Rachel. And sure enough, one of the partners that helps her sing songs is a non-binary person who identifies as non-binary. Obvious woman, but identifies as non-binary. So she has a crew cut, right?
Yeah.
Short hair, and plays the guitar, wears like a vest and a button-down shirt. I don't know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting part.
Yeah.
Why is that a show of your non-binariness.
Right.
Isn't it because it goes against the social norms of what a woman is? And you're going very close to what a man is.
Yep.
But you're not really a man, so you're non-binary. But it is always in the reference to the binary, right? You're leaving the binary of a woman to go to the binary of a man. And if you stop midway, then you're non-binary. But the reference points are always a man and a woman. You can't have some random reference point. It's like, it's always from this truth. So any kind of deviation is in reference to the truth. So that's why we can say this is really, really bad compared to this, because we have a reference point. The reference point is the truth. And so, we obviously don't show Miss Rachel anymore, but I think a lot of people, parents, get these recommendations. They just turn it on. And if a kid likes the first few minutes, they walk away because they're busy. They do the dishes, they vacuum, they do whatever. And sure enough, every once in a while, you see this non-binary person come up and play the guitar and sing a song, whatever it is, right? And her octave, which is a woman's octave.
Yeah.
Like, it's so clear that, your voice is a woman's voice.
Yeah.
Anyway, but, those are things that parents need to watch out for. It's everywhere, and they are all over our children's stuff.
Yeah, especially.
I think even like Transformers now are non-binary.
I saw that. Yeah.
But the Transformer sounds like a dude and he looks like a dude.
He pretty much preaches love is love. And it's really interesting because you're a Transformer.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Someone said to me, Transformers should be the ones that promote the binary the most because they're literal machines which work on binaries.
Yeah. It's very...
but yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're talking about Pride Month. And I mean, so far we've talked about how we can address the sin to a sinner. But I think, more specifically, since we are talking about the sin of the LGBTQ, how specifically can we address this issue? So, for example, do we go to dinner with our friend and their same-sex partner? And I know people have been asking Pastor this for a long time. Do we go to their wedding? Do we hang out with them? Do we ask them to come over? Do we welcome them into the fellowship? Do we welcome them to our church service? If someone walked in who we know is of that proclivity, that lifestyle, does our welcoming them look different from welcoming someone that doesn't? How do we minister to these people?
There are many questions that were asked there, not just one.
Yeah.
So it's not a yes or no answer, I suppose, that can possibly be given. If someone is getting married, it needs to be between a man and a woman. Okay. Then we can go to the marriage wedding ceremony and celebrate that.
Yeah.
If it's between a man and a man, we're not going to go to celebrate that. That's an abomination. Why would you go to celebrate? So when you attend a wedding, you're supporting these people, right? If two non-Christians are getting married, now this is a slightly different topic because you brought it up. If two non-Christians are getting married, I don't mind.
No, I was actually going to go there next.
Yeah. Two non-Christians are getting married, I don't mind because they don't know Jesus. As they get married, they celebrate the common grace that God has given society. And what you want to do is, by your attending and celebrating what God has done, you want to show them the grace of God, and you want to, talk about Jesus as much as you can. So there's always this in mind. But you can't do that with a man and a man and a woman and a woman. That's an abomination. That's an affront against God. It is directly spitting on the common grace that He gave us. And so that's something. I heard something from Harry Reeder that I appreciated. He wouldn't also, so he agrees with me on both fronts here. He wouldn't also go to a wedding where one person is a Christian and one person's not.
Yeah.
And so because the person who's not a Christian, a person who is a Christian is going against the word of God, specifically in 1 Corinthians, where you can't, bind yourself to someone that is not Christian. And so they are going against the word. So how can you celebrate someone who is going against directly the word of God and what he instructs his people. So Christians can only marry Christians.
And even cohabitators. He said that he wouldn't marry those who are cohabitating.
Yeah,
in
because
that
they're
sin.
in sin.
Right.
Right. Obviously, if someone's having like sexual relations with anybody, that's not their wife, even if
Right.
it's with their partner.
Right.
I wouldn't marry them.
Right.
And that's something I make straight, like, you know, I'm very straightforward about, make it well known to anybody that I counsel in pre-marriage counseling. You can't be sleeping together and you can't live together. Those are very, very basic things. And if they are living together, they need to separate and then start the pre-marriage counseling sessions. And I find it very honorable that they want to get married instead of just, you know, cohabitating. But it still has to be done under the rules and regulations that the word gives us. And none of this like, well, I know better than God. I think I could be more gracious than God is. That's ridiculous. I think that's out of pride. If a teacher does that, you are slowly slipping into that, you know, that downhill of hell.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so there's that. Do you eat with them? I think absolutely. I would eat with anybody, even if the governor of New Jersey said, you know, Eugene, would you like a meal with me? I would be like, absolutely, sir. You know, you are the one that God has appointed to lead this, to govern this state. But when we were talking, you would always point out the fact that you are under the rule of Jesus Christ. He has ultimate authority that you must submit to. And if you don't, it is to your detriment and the detriment of the people that you are called to serve. That's definitely what you have to do. But if I were to invite anybody, yeah, invite anybody. And you know, depending on the person that you're inviting, your conversations would change. Your point of inviting them would change, right?
Yeah.
If I'm having dinner with my wife, my conversation looks incredibly different than if I'm having dinner with someone who is a brand new church member, for instance, right? And the conversations will look different. I wouldn't talk about the same things I talk about my wife all day. That's weird. And so having dinner with people, even of the LGBTQIA, if they're willing to come to your house, that's awesome. If they invite you to their house, that's great.
Yeah.
But you will do it with intent that I am a Christian and I hold to these foundational beliefs. And if you ask me about them, I definitely would do it. If I'm invited to a housewarming, let's say, from someone who is in the LGBTQ or someone who has adopted this identity, and I go to their housewarming, I'm not going to go and ruin their thing by like preaching things. But if they bring it up, I'll definitely defend my position. But, you know, if it's just simply a housewarming, I might just go.
So, quick question. If I want to maybe switch it up a little bit. If you were to go do a housewarming, let's say, right, of two Christians that are cohabitating, you would be, in effect, supporting their cohabitation, right? In the same way, if you go to a housewarming or even a dinner where two people are in a same-sex relationship and they live together, aren't you in that way then supporting that in any sense?
Yes and no. So this is where it can get complex, but for me, I like to keep it simple. For me, the simpler, the better. And if you are going to err, I would always err on the side of caution too.
Yeah.
So if you are unsure about this and you just don't want to go, that's great. But if you go with the purposes of winning them over, that's different. Jesus ate in the house of sinners. And so when he went there, his purpose was to promote his teaching, to promote the truth, to show them that they are loved by him, and for them to heed that warnings, go and sin no more.
Yeah.
He went and said, Zacchaeus, I have to eat at your house today. And people were shocked. To them, tax collectors were the worst kind of people.
Yeah.
They are worse than Gentiles because they weren't the betrayer of their own kind. But that's exactly who Zacchaeus was. He was like a chief tax collector, right? And Jesus ate at his house. What was the purpose of that? In the end, Zacchaeus was transformed. You go with the purpose of sharing the truth. Jesus is truth. And so I wouldn't go and leave Jesus outside the door. If someone said to me, you can only come to my housewarming if you don't talk about that Jesus stuff, I would be like, no, that's not going to happen. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I go, I'm always purposeful in my conversation. And so I would do this anywhere though. When I have lunch with friends of mine that I grew up with that don't know Jesus Christ, they come and they say to me like, "Bro, do you talk like this all the time?" Because they thought we are just going to have dinner or lunch.
Yeah.
That's like light. Oh, how are you and your family doing? How are your kids doing? I don't talk like that with people who don't know Jesus Christ. And they're like, "Man, this is kind of heavy." I was like, if it's too heavy, I could tail back a little bit. But I got to let you know, this is what's really important.
Yeah.
Do you disagree though? Do you not like it that I also think this is very heavy? And so they're like, "Man, you can't be talking like this 24/7, do you?" He's like, "I don't know. I talk what I think is appropriate." And so even with friends of mine who don't attend church, they know what I'm going to talk about. And so it's one of those things where if you are a person who professes Jesus Christ and you're putting Jesus by the wayside or the door when you enter into a certain area, man, isn't Jesus going to say, "I reject you because you rejected me"? And that's a scary thing to do. If he's Lord over your life, then he's Lord over your life.
Yeah.
And so even if you go to an LGBTQ house, whatever it is, like those are things that I would still not check out the door. I would say, well, the purpose of me going then is to show them the superiority of Christ, the supremacy of Christ, how Christ is Lord over all. And it is by my actions and it is by my words. That can't escape you. I'm not just going to sit in the corner and just eat my fish and chips and leave. Or I don't know, chips and dip, whatever it is that you do when you go to a housewarming.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hope that makes sense. And if you don't have confidence to do that, then yeah, simple is good. Don't go then. But if you know this is what you've been called to do because you really love the person, you want to call them out of the poop that they're in, then yeah, of course you'll speak about it. You'll speak about it ad nauseum, perhaps in their eyes. But it's not because you want to be nauseating. It's because you really do care for them. And I hope people understand that. They might not like me as much as they used to when we were kids, but I hope they never doubt that I still love them. And because I love them, I want to tell them about this. I hope that becomes a sincere kind of place where I'm from. And so, yeah, it takes time for that to develop. And some people learn by practice. We have people, even people that listen to this podcast who have an evangelist heart, who immediately want to talk to people about Jesus Christ, call them out of their sin. And they come back to me as like, maybe I could have said it better. I think that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. You want to hone your skills, get better at it. But it's better than not doing anything, in my opinion. But if you feel completely ill-equipped, you're not confident at all, and if you're just going to go there and sit and eat chips and dip, and you feel like you don't want to go, that's fine too. Don't go. But I would think that in the end, what you want to do is, if you really love the person, call them out of the poop.
As a church, how should we welcome those who may be of that agenda?
It doesn't matter if they are LGBTQIA plus 2S, whatever it is. It doesn't matter if they're Mormons. It doesn't matter if they're Jehovah's Witnesses. When people come to our church service, what they are participating in, what they are spectating in, is the worship to our God.
Yeah.
We don't do seeker-sensitive stuff. We don't placate to the attendee. We worship God, which means worship is from the word service. It's serving God. It's giving him glory. It's giving him praise. And so if they want to participate in that, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But we don't adjust it for the non-believer. We adjust it to God. And I think that's something that we need to remember. And that's a great question. Why do we do the things that we do? Why do we have confessions in the way we have? Why do we have prayers in the way we have? Because it's biblical. And it is, the regulative principle that we understand that the Bible gives us in worship. We ought to do these things because the Bible regulates it. This is how God wants to be worshiped. And so they're invited, 100% they're invited, and they will be called to repentance if you hear any part of our element. But can they sit through the service? I've had, even in our church service, I've had people walk up and leave the room because they can't take what's being said. 100%. And so I'm not attacking them. I'm just telling them what the word says.
Yeah.
If they feel attacked and they can't take it, then I pray for their souls. I hope that they'll one day realize the harm that they are doing to themselves and to society by not adhering to God's law, whatever it is. It could be sexual mores. It could be other things that, are an affront to God's law, like, not honoring your parents or, not stealing, or not committing adultery, all those things, right?
Thank you for that. And I want to ask one more question as we close up this Pride Month episode. Just kind of curious, I guess, going back to what we had started to talk about or in the beginning of businesses representing Pride Month. Because like you said before, there's very little businesses, at least in the public eye, that are not supporting Pride. And maybe they're supporting it because they're in the public eye. Like even boxing companies. I follow boxing on Instagram, and even boxing promoters have their new logo in rainbow colors. Baseball teams, NFL, Starbucks. We went to a Starbucks the other day, and we saw a Starbucks pride flag in the Starbucks. And so just wondering, how is this different from the Apostle Paul's discussion of food being offered up to idols in 1 Corinthians? Understanding that we shouldn't, if it may stumble others. Can we patronize these companies if it does not stumble us? How do we kind of, I guess just to wrap it up, how do we live now for this next month with the stores, the coffee shops, the sports teams, the businesses that we frequent, supporting an agenda that is specifically anti-God and anti-gospel?
Yeah, so when Paul talks about the food offered up to idols in 1 Corinthians, and how it's the weaker brother because it brings them back to the actions that were done in those idol temples, right? That's something that the Christian doesn't have to think about when they eat food. Food is food, right? And so that's something that you can think about. Food is food. But you wouldn't necessarily buy an idol, right? Would you buy a little idol? That's not something Paul would be okay with. And so what is the distinction that Paul is drawing here? The main point of this part is what you want to do is you want to be able to serve the weaker brother. You don't want to crush his soul when he's so weak and like an infant. You want to be able to treat the weaker brother as a weaker brother so that they will grow and mature. That's the point of the passage. The point of the passage isn't to give us some kind of formula for us to understand how to take food. And if we talk about food, man, now one of the places that we used to love even has a DEI page, Chick-fil-A. If you go to chickfil-a.com/DEI, they literally have a DEI page. And that has been disappointing to so many Christians. And their response is, well, we're supposed to be inclusive. We're supposed to care for anybody. We will serve anybody, that kind of thing. But why'd you have to do the DEI thing? It's because of this index, because they have investors that are not the common investors. They're not the individual investors. These are these grand brokerage firms that get to dictate and give you points on how much they'll give you or invest in you, depending on your DEI score or whatever it is. And so we are in a world where idols are all around us. And so what does Paul do when he goes to Mars Hill? All right. When he goes to the Areopagus, he still preaches the gospel.
Yeah.
Did he not eat while he was there? I bet there are a ton of foods that were dedicated to Artemis or whatever it is, right? He ate, but the point was the gospel. I think that's the point that we have to always keep in mind. The point is the gospel. And if you're worrying about who you can patronize and who you can't patronize, it might be a daunting task for you. For me, it is, if there is a movement to try to shape these corporations like the boycotting of Bud Light or Target, I enjoy that personally. I don't think it's a hard, fast rule. I enjoy that personally. And I would think that it would be a good thing to join in this kind of boycott to see how they respond. And
Yeah.
what happened is a lot of these, like the things that I talked about the whole like brokerage firms really backing them, that came to light because of these boycotts. You know, well, how can Target still do this and promote this when they're losing over $10 billion in sales, right? And so those are things where I continue to recognize when people talk to me online about it. I always say, Jesus is light, and light will always shine in the darkness. It'll eventually always come into the light. And so I think wisdom is at play here. If you need to feed your kids the best kind of food. If someone's twerking in front of the burger store, yeah, don't patronize that store.
Yeah.
But if you hear about, you know, this burger store, like Burger King is going to give to HRC, which is the Human Rights Campaign, which is one of the most egregious LGBTQ promoters, hiding behind an Orwellian name like Human Rights Campaign, then yeah, maybe I won't patronize Burger King. But if it's the only thing out there to eat, I'll just eat it. It won't sear my conscience at all.
Yeah.
We won't do anything. But if I don't have to eat it, I won't. If I don't have to shop at Target, I won't. But it's not like a hard, fast rule where if Target is the only shop out there, man, I can't patronize them and not feed my kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't take it as a matter of like this is one of the 10 commandments when you break. But it is something that I enjoy that we are doing. I wouldn't want to break the momentum that, you know, Christians and other conservatives are having when they're trying to show these big corporations, you can't manipulate us, and we're trying to send a statement. I think that's a wonderful thing. I want to see how this ends up. I'm very curious.
Yeah.
But, you know, Chick-fil-A has been very disappointing. Will I never eat Chick-fil-A again? I don't know, but it's not going to be the first thing that comes to mind. And so those are things that I always keep in mind. But it's not something where I'm like, oh no, I can't eat a Chick-fil-A. Oh no, I can't buy Nike. Oh no, it's like, you know, if you have Nike shoes and if there are better shoes out there, I'll buy those.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't necessarily boycott Nike, but I wouldn't give them all my money. I wouldn't be like a Nike fan. I wouldn't only wear Nike apparel or something like that.
Yeah.
And so for me, it can be a little complex, but yeah, I wouldn't think that this is the primary thing that we have to worry about. The primary thing should always be primary. And the secondary, tertiary, I think, flows from the primary. And so if I'm focused so much on whether I can shop at Target or not, I think I missed the point.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Pastor Gene. And as we close up this episode, if you have any other questions that we didn't address, or maybe you have more questions as you've been listening to this podcast, please email us at podcast@cgsnj.org, and we'd be happy to have this discussion with you. Any comments, Newsluck?
Great episode.
Thank you. Who were you saying that to? Me or?
Mainly Pastor Eugene.
Yeah, it was. It was a good one. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we go into the cults. Very cultish. Tune in next week to find out. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight. Finish the race. Keep the faith.
Peace.